On today's show, we have Rick Hodge, Executive Vice President for InfoLogix. Thank you, Rick, for being with us today at itpodcast.org.
Sure. Thank you, Spencer, for having us. We appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I've been in healthcare, and especially health IT, for 14 years. And what I've seen in my experience is that the best efficiencies and accuracy comes from when nursing is actually documenting in the room right next to the patient, rather than the way they typically do it, which is to write down the information, take it out to the nursing station, and then enter it. But the problem that I've seen is that whenever I give a nurse a mobile cart, they usually end up using it out at the nursing station more like a fixed workstation. Can you give me some examples of how you've seen this type of action overcome and how you can really get the interaction to take place at the bedside as it really should happen?
Sure. We go into these opportunities, and our approach is basically, it may not be a cart. There may be a different device for every different organization within the hospital. There may be a different device on the general med surg floors. There may be a different device in OR. There may be a different device in the critical care areas. So that being said, the thing we try and do is we try and help the clinicians and the users understand the workflow. And we do that. We have a nationwide consulting company around the country that is physicians, nurses, and pharmacists. So the starting point is to evaluate the workflow, because we certainly don't want to automate an inefficient process. So with the technology, we try and help the nurses understand how they can become better equipped to do their job and give care to the patient in a safe manner and give that patient a very good experience in the hospital. So we do it a couple ways. Number one, you got to make sure you have the right product. So you're right. Some of the cart companies out there have a very large cart, and they try and provide the customers drawers and all types of things. So then the carts become very heavy and cumbersome, and you're absolutely right. Nurses will not bring them into the rooms. So it's really understanding the need of the nurse, the application, and then giving that nurse the proper training that allows them to understand how the product's supposed to be used to make them, the most efficient as possible.
Well, I'm assuming that since you've partnered with some of the HIS vendors, you know how the specific HIS you're working with can be configured with best practices in mind to make that workflow work in a way that actually takes advantage of the various capabilities of the systems.
Correct. Yeah, we've been working with a lot of the HIS companies, and it's not only understanding the hardware aspect of it or the cart and the wireless aspect. It's also understanding the application that's going to run on the device, because I think that's very important. And I think a lot of the cart companies and competitors out there don't really understand how the product is going to be used itself, where we try and understand that first and foremost. And we do that, again, through our consulting company, and clinicians, people that have been in the clinical environment, have been on the other side giving patient care, and also know technology. So we try and merge the two together. And again, it goes back to educating, training, and doing a lot of hand-holding when it comes to the workflow.
Can you explain some of the benefits of using mobility solutions versus documenting at a central location?
Sure, absolutely. First and foremost, it's real-time information. So not only do you have the capabilities to input information, you also have the capabilities to get information. So when you're standing in front of a patient, you're giving that patient care. If you want to see notes, or you want to see maybe some previous orders that were put in by a physician, you have that access real time. That's number one. Accuracy, number two, is key, where instead of taking a note and then walking back to the patient's or to a central area to do your inputting, and that's two steps. So you have people transposing numbers, transposing decimal points, and I'm sure you're very familiar with what happened out Cedars-Sinai out Southern California with the Dennis Quaid twins, where unfortunately a decimal point was moved over to 2 characters, and it happened to be 100 milligrams instead of a tenth of a milligram. And so you alleviate some of those errors when you're documenting right at the bedside. The other thing of documenting at the bedside, we've found that patients feel very, very comfortable, and it almost raises their level of satisfaction, because they read about the errors, they hear about the errors in hospitals, and now a lot of hospitals are starting to market the fact that they do bedside documentation and how safe it is.
Well, let me interrupt you for just a second there, and I'd
Sure.
like to second that. Whenever I was working at Methodist Healthcare, we implemented mobile solutions, and we actually had only a couple of nurses who were very comfortable going into the patient room and actually documenting in the room. those nurses consistently had the best patient satisfaction scores. They tended to interact with their patients, they had more face time with their patients, and they actually were able to get better information by sharing with the patients what they were doing. So I just wanted to second that.
Yeah, it's fact, and we're hearing that more and more every day. So on to your next question, as far as putting some kind of technology in the room and mounting it on the wall to do documentation. And, we're not opposed to that. Again, we go into these opportunities with the assumption and the thought process that there is not one device for every user in the hospital. So, I can tell you putting a wall mount or some kind of computer in every room, there's a couple things. Number one, there's cost associated with that. There's support associated with that. You have to run a network drop to every room. So it can get costly. When you have mobile carts, they're just that. They're mobile. You could put more in the areas that need them at any given time, and it decreases cost a little bit.
Well, let me ask this. This just came up on one of the listservs that I'm on today, where they're using mobile carts, but the HIS is now working at 1024 by 768 resolution, and the nursing staff are complaining that the screen fonts are too small and they wanted a bigger monitor. Are you talking about carts that can utilize 19 or 20-inch monitors?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure of.
Yeah, we currently, and we currently can put, even in OR for X-rays, we in some cases have put 32-inch monitor on a cart. And again, it all goes back to the weight of the cart and fitting the right product for the right application.
It seems that every time you want to implement some sort of new technology, the expectation is that the technology staff is going to do that. And when it comes to this type of technology, where it's really going to be affecting nursing and patient care, I've always felt that nursing leadership is key to making this work. Have you seen that also?
Absolutely. And again, what we try and do is bring credibility to our thought process by bringing in a clinician, one of our consultants that, again, have been on the other side, that has been a nurse for 20 years, that understands what a nurse goes through on a daily basis, and then relates that process and that workflow to the technology. And once you get the nursing leadership educated on it, it really does help the process, because we all know if the users, and it's funny, if people spend $20 million to implement an HIS system, and the HIS system is just that. It's for clinical documentation that you do electronic, which means mobility. And they'll spend $20 million to put this in. It'll take them 3 years. And after 2.5 years, they'll say, whoa, we need mobile technology. We better go out and look at it. Instead of thinking about that up front and making that one of the core pieces of the system, because that's really what the users see. They don't see any of the back-end server stuff and how the system works. They just know when they walk up to a patient what product they're using to document and how they're documenting. And sometimes it comes to the end of a project. A go-live date is in 2 months, so the hospital has to, rush around and try and find a mobile unit that fits. And sometimes they make a bad decision due to timing. And, if the users aren't real happy with the product, then we're not going to have a successful implementation. And it's really a sin when you spend that much money and it comes down to a piece of equipment not working properly.
I think that's a great point, because whenever I've done this before, I have always linked the product selection portion with basically the kickoff of the clinical information system. And I've had multiple vendors come in and offer 2 or 3 different types of tablets, 2 or 3 different types of carts. And I use those for 30 to 60 days in different environments, usually in a test system, but let nursing come back and say, man, this one's great and this one is horrible. I don't ever want to see this one in our hospital. So
yeah, absolutely.
Now, I know that you make a number of different types of devices, but how does InfoLogix keep up with regulatory compliance such as HIPAA and Joint Commission and make modifications to your designs to affect those changes?
With the consulting folks that we have, they're in hospitals and they range from helping a customer write an RFP to help choose and implement an HIS system, help train on that system, and they do change management, they do outcomes-based stuff. So they need to really stay up on HIPAA and kind of what the industry regulators are doing. We see a big difference from a JACO requirement or an ergonomics requirement from a hospital in New Jersey to a hospital in California. So it's real. And then wall mount units, when you mount stuff on a wall, there's a lot of different regulations in each state. So, we definitely get our consultants to stay up to date on that.
All right, Rick, thank you very much for being with us today.